In the year 1377, inside the crumbling, wind-battered fortress of Khalat ibn Salama, in the Algerian hinterlands, a man sat alone with a stack of parchment and a terrifying realization. The world around him was not just changing, it was dying. The Black Death had recently swept across the Mediterranean, turning vibrant cities into graveyards, and the once mighty Islamic empires of North Africa were fracturing into petty, warring states. But while other scholars looked to the stars or to ancient religious texts for an explanation, this man, Ibn Khaldun, looked at the marketplace. He looked at the price of wheat, the weight of the gold denar, and the ledger of the tax collector. In that isolation, he discovered a mathematical inevitability that would haunt leaders for the next 600 years. He realized that civilizations are not murdered by external enemies. They commit suicide. They die by their own hand, and the weapon of choice is always the same: the slow, seductive, and invisible poison of economic indulgence. He was the first human being to realize that history is not a straight line of progress, but a vicious, repeating circular trap that captures every empire, every republic, and every superpower, no matter how advanced they believe they are. Before we uncover these hidden ledgers and the cyclical traps that govern our wallets today, make sure you are subscribed to Deep Financial Story. Here, we decode the history that money doesn't want you to know. To understand the genius of Ibn Khaldun, you have to understand the world he was trying to save. He was a politician, a judge, and a diplomat who had served the sultans of Fez, Granada, and Cairo. He had seen the inner workings of power, and what he saw was a recurring nightmare. He observed that every dynasty, without exception, followed a precise biological lifespan, exactly like a human being. It is born, it grows, it reaches maturity, it becomes senile, and it dies. But the invisible villain in this story wasn't time itself. It was the mechanism of extraction, the tax system. Ibn Khaldun mapped out what we now call the dynastic cycle, but it is effectively an economic algorithm for collapse. It begins with the first generation. These are the pioneers, the desert-toughened people who have nothing to lose. They are united by what Khaldun called asabiya, or social cohesion. They conquer a decaying city because they are hungry and disciplined. In this early stage, the government is small, the rulers live simply, and most importantly, taxes are low. Because the state takes very little, the merchants keep their profits. This incentivizes hard work. Production booms, the markets are flooded with goods. This is the era of the virtuous cycle, where low taxes yield high revenues because the economy itself is expanding rapidly. But then comes the second generation, the sons of the pioneers. They have never known hunger. They have grown up in the palaces their fathers conquered. They begin to enjoy the finer things: silks from China, spices from India, monumental architecture. The ruler moves from being a protector of the people to being a consumer of the people's wealth. To fund this new lifestyle, the state needs more money. So, they raise the tax rates. At first, it seems to work. The treasury swells, and the capital city shines with gold. The public sees this as the golden age, but Ibn Khaldun saw it as the beginning of the cancer. The invisible villain has entered the room. The state begins to interfere in the market, not as a referee, but as a player. Then, inevitably, comes the third generation, the spenders. By now, the memory of the desert is gone. The ruling elite are addicted to luxury, and the bureaucracy has bloated into a massive, parasitic machine. They need more money, always more money. They raise taxes again and again. Tariffs are slapped on every gate. Fees are attached to every transaction. But here, Ibn Khaldun observed a phenomenon that modern economists would rediscover in the 1970s and call the Laffer curve. He noticed that as tax rates climbed past a certain point, the total revenue collected actually began to drop. Why? Because the invisible villain had crushed the incentive to work. When the merchant knows the state will take half his profit, he stops taking risks. When the farmer knows the tax collector will seize his surplus, he only grows enough to feed his family. The economy contracts. The market stalls. The invisible villain is no longer hiding. It is eating the host alive. The state, desperate to maintain its lavish lifestyle and pay its army, begins to seize property directly. They invent crimes to confiscate wealth. They debase the currency, mixing copper with gold, creating inflation that robs the poor to pay the debts of the rich. The trap is set, and the public is helpless. The social cohesion, that asabiya that built the empire, is shattered. The people no longer see the state as us. They see it as them. The ruler is forced to hire mercenaries to protect himself from his own citizens. which costs even more money, requiring even higher taxes, deepening the death spiral. The city that was once a hub of innovation becomes a prison of stagnation. The walls are still high, the soldiers still march, but the heart of the civilization has stopped beating. It is a hollow shell, waiting for the next group of hungry wolves to kick down the door. Ibn Khaldun wrote these words in a mud-brick castle while the bubonic plague ravaged the world outside. But he could easily have been writing about the 21st century. He described a specific point of no return, the moment when the government becomes the ultimate monopoly, suffocating the very commerce that feeds it. He identified that the desire for luxury and the expansion of the state are not signs of success, but symptoms of terminal illness. He saw that wealth does not disappear. It simply migrates away from places where it is punished. For centuries, his work was ignored by the West, treated as a curiosity from the Orient. But as modern economies bloat with debt, as tax codes become books thicker than the Bible, and as the gap between the ruling elite and the working class widens into a chasm, Khaldun's ghost has returned. He warned us that the cycle is not a possibility. It is a law of nature. Gravity applies to empires just as it applies to stones. We look around today and we see the monuments of our own golden age. We see the skyscrapers, the stock markets, the infinite digital distractions. We convince ourselves that we have broken the wheel, that we are smarter than the desert tribes of the 14th century. But if you look at the ledger, if you look at the burn rate of our civilization, a terrifying picture emerges. We are not in the first generation of pioneers. We are not even in the second generation of builders. We are displaying every clinical symptom of the third generation: the addiction to debt, the stagnation of real productivity, the fracturing of social cohesion. The invisible villain has been feeding for decades, and the host is getting weak. The cycle that Ibn Khaldun mapped out 600 years ago is spinning toward its final quadrant. And this time, there are no desert fortresses left to hide in. Ibn Khaldun didn't just diagnose the disease. He predicted the exact timeline of the death. He famously categorized the lifespan of a dynasty into 4 distinct generations, a prophecy that feels less like history and more like a mirror held up to the modern West. The first generation is the builder. They are tough, frugal, and united by hardship. They build the roads, fight the wars, and save every penny. They understand the value of a hard day's work because they remember what it was like to starve. The second generation is the administrator. They inherit the wealth and the stability. They expand the system, build the institutions, and solidify the power. They are still competent, but they lack the fire of their fathers. They start to enjoy the fruits of labor they didn't perform. The third generation is the consumer. They are born into abundance. They view the prosperity not as a result of sacrifice, but as a natural right. They have never known struggle, so they have no concept of tragedy. They spend lavishly on art, entertainment, and wars of choice. They allow the bureaucracy to bloat because they believe the money will never run out. And finally, the fourth generation is the squanderer. This is the generation that breaks the back of the camel. They are technically the wealthiest, surrounded by the highest technology and the most complex financial instruments, but they are spiritually and economically bankrupt. They have lost the asabi, the social glue that binds a people together. They view their own history with disdain and their own future with apathy. Does this sound familiar? In the modern world, the invisible villain has evolved. In Khaldun's time, the Sultan would physically send soldiers to take your grain. Today, the extraction is cleaner, quieter, and far more efficient. The modern tax collector is inflation. When a government can no longer raise taxes without causing a revolt, they simply print the money they need. This devalues every dollar in your pocket, effectively stealing your time and labor without ever knocking on your door. It is the perfect crime because the victim doesn't even know who to blame. This creates the modern trap. We have more gadgets, more entertainment, and more calories than any generation in human history. Yet we feel poorer. We feel more anxious. Why? Because the asabiya is gone. The trust between the ruler and the ruled has evaporated. We look at our institutions and see corruption. They look at us and see revenue sources. The social contract is broken. Khaldun warned that when a civilization reaches this stage, the government becomes an old man. It is senile, fearful, and reactionary. It tries to control everything because it can create nothing. It regulates small businesses to death while protecting the monopolies that pay the bribes. It stifles innovation because innovation threatens the status quo. The economy becomes a zombie walking, eating, but dead inside. So, what actually worked? History is clear. The societies that thrived were those with low taxes and high trust. They were societies where the government saw itself as a gardener, not a factory owner pulling the weeds of crime and corruption, but leaving the plants alone to grow toward the sun. They understood that wealth is created by the people, not the state. What didn't work? The welfare warfare state. The belief that you can spend your way to prosperity. The arrogance of thinking you can manage an economy from a central office. The delusion that you can print infinite money on a finite planet. The cycle is turning, and the hour is late. But Khaldun left us with a final, crucial insight. The cycle is inevitable for nations, but it is not inevitable for individuals. You do not have to be a squanderer just because you were born in the 4th generation. You can choose to be a builder. You can build your own asabaya, your own tribe of trustworthy people. You can build your own economy, one based on real assets, real skills, and real value, not on debt and speculation. You can reject the consumer mindset and embrace the producer mindset. The empires of the world will continue to rise and fall like the tides of the ocean. You cannot stop the moon from pulling the water, but you can learn to build a boat that doesn't sink. This is deep financial story. The history is deep, but the future is yours to build.